My name is Nora Ellison, and I was 34 the day my little sister walked onto my unit like she owned it. I was charting at the ICU station in Idaho Falls when I heard her laugh in the hallway. That bright, practiced laugh, and my whole body went cold before my brain caught up. Brooke, 2,000 miles from where I'd left her. My parents raised us in the same house, and somehow I still spent every holiday alone in it. What she asked me to do 6 weeks later cost me the one thing I'd spent 7 years earning. Welcome back to family hidden fight, where we sit with the quiet betrayals inside ordinary families and the people who finally stop apologizing for surviving them. Drop a comment and be sure to subscribe. I need you to understand what she was walking into because it wasn't nothing. It took me 6 years to build. When I landed in Idaho at 27, I had $400 and a nursing license and no one who knew my last name. I rented a room over a garage. I took every night shift they'd give me. I learned this unit the way some people learn scripture until the monitors talked to me and the doctors trusted my read on a patient before they trusted the labs. Deb Callahan trained me my first winter here, and she became the closest thing to a mother I'd had in years. Dr. Ackafer, our lead intensivist, once told a room full of residents that if Nora Ellison says a patient is turning, you move. That's a life. I made that. Nobody handed it to me on a holiday while I watched from the window, because here's the thing my family never quite managed to say out loud. And here's the sentence I carried across the country like a stone in my coat. They always found room for Brooke. For me, they found a plate on the porch. I didn't tell people that. I didn't tell anyone here about the porch or the plate or the 7 Thanksgivings I spent watching tail lights. I just worked. And I got good, and I got quiet, and I got free. And for 6 years it held. Then a woman from HR walked our new director down the hall for a meet and greet, and the director's heels clicked in my floor, and she turned, and it was my sister smiling at me like a photograph she'd been waiting to take. You'd think a family leaving one kid home would need a good excuse. Mine never even needed a consistent one. When I was 9, it was that I'd get carsick on the drive to the lake, so I stayed with a neighbor while they took Brooke. When I was 12, it was that the Orlando tickets came in a set of 3, and I wouldn't want to be the odd one out anyway, so I was the odd one out Athome. At 15, it was money, which was funny because Brooke got a ski trip that same February. There was always a reason, and each reason was reasonable on its own, and that was the trick of it. You can't fight a reasonable thing. If I cried, I was dramatic. If I asked why I was starting something, my father would say, "Nora, don't make your mother feel bad." As if her feelings were the fragile thing in the room, and not the 12-year-old learning she came in second to her own sister. Brooke didn't do this to me, not really. Brooke was 4 years younger, and she just lived inside the warm part of the house, the way you live inside a climate you were born to. She didn't know there was a porch. She'd never once stood on it. So when people ask me why I don't just talk to my sister, why I don't just clear the air, I want to tell them the air was never the problem. The house was built crooked before either of us could walk. You don't clear that, you move out. The HR woman was still talking when the floor dropped out from under me. "Nora, this is Brooke Vance, our new director of patient experience. She'll be partnering with all the units on culture and quality." Vance. She'd taken Kyle's name. For one merciful second, I thought it might be a stranger, a coincidence, some other Brooke. Then she said, "Actually, Sharon, we know each other." And her smile widened and she added, "This is my sister." And I watched every nurse at that station file the information away. Director of patient experience. I ran the beat in my head like a rhythm strip. Patient experience sat over the units on anything to do with culture, which meant, in the org chart nobody says out loud, my sister now had a line into how my work got graded. I kept my face flat. I've held a face flat over a coding patient. I could hold it over this. "Welcome to Idaho Falls," I said, and shook her hand like she was a vendor. Her hand was soft. Mine had 2 years of hospital sanitizer built into it. "I didn't know you were here," she said, warm, wondering, and I almost believed the not knowing, almost. because behind the warmth was a small, satisfied stillness, the look of someone who had found the last page of a book they'd been trying to finish. She'd known. Maybe not the room, but the city. Maybe not the shift, but the name on the directory. You don't take a job 2,000 miles from home and get surprised by the one relative who lives there. I smiled and went back to my charting, and my hands did not shake, and that felt like a small, cold victory. By the end of the week, we had a story, and I hadn't agreed to any of it. Brooke told it in the break room, to Deb, to the charge nurses, to a resident who didn't know better. Nora and I lost touch for a few years. She'd say, light as a napkin. And then the universe puts us in the same hospital. Can you believe it? Lost touch. Like we drifted at a party. She'd rest a hand on my shoulder when she said it in front of people, and I couldn't shrug it off without becoming the villain of the scene. That's the part nobody warns you about. When someone builds a nice story around you in public, refusing to stand in it makes you look cruel. She'd call me sis in front of the unit, and the unit would smile, because it's a sweet thing. Two sisters reunited, and I would feel the old machinery start up under my feet, the machinery that says, your job is to make this look good for her. I watched Deb soften toward Brooke over 3 days. Deb, who was mine. She seems lovely, Deb said, and I said, MHM, and charted a pain score because the alternative was explaining a childhood in a hallway. The stage was up. The lights were warm. And I'd been cast again, without a single audition, in the role I'd driven across the country to quit. My sister smiled at me over the nurse's station, and I understood that she wasn't here to reconnect. She was here to reunite, which is a different thing. Reuniting requires an audience, and she'd already found one. Here's what made it worse. I finally wanted something, out loud for the first time in years. The nurse manager position for the ICU had opened when Sandra retired, and Dr. Ockhafer stopped me by the med room and said, "You're applying. Don't argue." I'd argue with most compliments. I didn't argue with that one. I wanted it, not the title. The title I could take or leave. I wanted the say. I wanted to build the schedule that didn't burn people out, to hire the nurses who'd stay, to run the unit the way I'd quietly been running it for 2 years while someone else got the office. It was mine to earn, and I could feel it within reach. And reaching for something is a vulnerable position. You expose your whole side because the manager decision went to a panel, and the panel weighed unit culture and patient experience metrics. And you already know whose department owned those words now. I told myself it didn't matter. Competence is competence. The numbers on my unit were good because I made them good. But I'd spent a childhood learning that being the most deserving person in the room does not get you in the car. Merit was never the currency in my family. Proximity was. Warmth was. Being easy to love in the moment beat being right over the long haul every single time. And now, the woman who had always effortlessly been easy to love in the moment was 3 doors down with a badge that said she got a vote on my future. I applied that afternoon. I hit submit and felt like I'd handed someone a knife and asked them to hold it carefully. My mother texted me that night for the first time in 7 years. I know it was the first time because I still had the old thread, and above her new message was a gray wall of the last things she'd ever said to me back when I was 27 and packing. The new message sat on top of all of it like it was nothing. Brooke told us where you are. We're coming to visit. Your father misses you so much. Love, Mom. I read it standing in my kitchen with the fridge humming. I never gave them my address. I never gave them my city. I'd built a whole life on the foundation of them not knowing where the door was, and my sister had handed them the map her second week in town. Your father misses you so not. I'm sorry. Not. We were wrong. Not. We've thought about the porch every year and it haunts us. Just we're coming and you'll host the feeling the way you always hosted the feeling. I put the phone face down on the counter. Then I turned it back over and read it again. Because that's the thing about a wound that old. Part of you still leans toward the voice. Part of you 34 years old with a good life and clean scrubs is 9 again for 1 second hopping. This is the year they packed a 4th ticket. I hated that part of me. I'd spent so much money and so many miles trying to kill it. And there it was, alive, leaning toward my mother's text like a plant toward a window, What did they actually want? I didn't sleep. And in the morning, I found out they'd already booked the flights. They came the following Thursday and stayed at a Hampton Inn near the interstate, which they mentioned twice, as if a hotel were a gift they were giving me. My father hugged me in the lobby like the last 7 years had been a long weekend. He smelled the same, cedar and coffee, and my throat did something I didn't authorize. There she is, he said. There's my girl. My mother, Carol, hung back a half step and looked me over. And her first words were, "You're too thin. Are you eating? 7 years." And the opening note was my body. We went to an Olive Garden because Brooke picked it, and Brooke picked everything. And my parents let her. The way you let water run downhill. Kyle was back in Ohio with their daughter, so it was the 4 of us in a vinyl booth, a family portrait with one figure who kept checking the exits. I watched my mother arrange the table's mood like she was setting out napkins. She laughed at my father's jokes a beat early. She told the waiter we were celebrating being all together again. She built the scene brick by brick, and the scene had a shape, and the shape was nothing ever happened. There was no porch. There was no plate. There were just 2 sisters and their proud parents and a bottomless bowl of salad, and if I said otherwise, I'd be the one who ruined the reunion. I recognized the architecture immediately. I grew up in it. What I hadn't expected was how fast my own hands remembered their old job, reaching for the bread, refilling waters, smoothing, managing, making it easy for everyone but me, old muscle. I put my hands in my lap and made them stay there. If you've ever been the guest at your own family's table, you already know how this dinner ends. Stay with me. The conversation had a gravity, and the gravity was Brooke. Her promotion first. Director. My mother said, tasting the word like wine. Do you know how many people she manages? Then Lily, the granddaughter, the photospist around, the ballet, the reading level. My father asked me one question, whether the winters here were hard. And before I finished answering, my mother was telling Brooke she looked tired and should let Kyle take Lily more. I sat in the booth and felt the temperature of a specific old feeling, the one where you slowly go quiet, not because you have nothing to say, but because you've learned your sentences don't change the weather. 20 minutes in, I was garnish. I decided to test it. Small, I said, I'd rather not spend the whole visit on the past, but I do want to talk about some of it while you're here. Reasonable, adult. My mother's smile didn't move, but her eyes did. Oh, Nora, she said, we didn't fly all this way to dig up old business. Dig up. Like the porch was a body I kept insisting on exhuming. My father put his hand over mine on the table, warm and heavy, and said, Let's just enjoy tonight, sweetheart. And there it was, the whole system in one gesture. Comfort deployed as a wall. Affection used to change the subject. I looked at my sister expecting a smirk, and instead she was watching me with almost like worry, and that unsettled me more than a smirk would have. I excused myself to the bathroom and stood at the sink and breathed until the mirror stopped shaking. I tried once more at the end in the parking lot because I am apparently a slow learner with a stubborn streak. The valet stand was empty and Thainter State hissed behind us, and I just said it plainly. Mom, do you remember the Thanksgiving before I left? You left a plate for me on the porch. I wasn't loud. I wanted to see if the words could exist in the air between us without the building falling down. My mother's face did something complicated. For a moment, I saw it. A flicker of the thing underneath, fear maybe, or the exhaustion of a woman who has spent 40 years holding a story together with both hands and cannot let go of one corner without the whole thing coming down. Then it closed. We're family, she said. Family doesn't keep score. And my father said, Carol, it's cold, and steered her toward the rental. And Brooke touched my arm and murmured, She means well, Nora, she really does. And I stood in an Olive Garden parking lot in Idaho at 34 years old and understood, finally and completely, why they'd come. Not to account for the porch, to bury it. To fly 2,000 miles and pour warm dinner over it until it softened and disappeared so that the family story could stay smooth and my mother would never have to look at the corner she'd been holding. They didn't want their daughter back. They wanted the record clean. And a clean record required my silence, my forgetting, my hands reaching for the bread. Accountability was never on the table, Only amnesia served family style. I drove home alone. I did not cry. That night I lay awake doing the thing I swore I'd stupetoing, wondering what was wrong with me that being loved required this much editing. The visit ended, but Brooke didn't leave because Brooke lived here now. And that was the trap I kept forgetting the shape of. Monday she was back on my floor with a clipboard and a program. Patient Experience Initiative, she called it. And it sounded lovely. And underneath it was a scalpel with my name on it. She shadowed me on rounds. She watched me tell a family, honestly, that their father was not going to wake up because they deserved to plan their lives around the truth and not around a hope I knew was empty. Afterward, in the hall, she said gently, "You're so good with them, Nora." I just wonder if we could soften the delivery a little. Warmth scores really matter to the board. Soften the delivery. She said it kindly, which is how the best ones say it. She wasn't wrong that I'm blunt. I am blunt. Bluntness has held families together at the worst hour of their lives because I did not waste their time with fog. But now my bluntness had a name in a report, and the name was a deficiency, and the person writing the report shared my last name and my mother's phone number. I could feel the frame going up around me board by board. Not a lie exactly. A reframe. My directness, which was my competence, was being quietly recategorized as a warmth problem, a culture problem, a Nora problem. And there was almost nothing to grab onto and fight because everything she said came wrapped in a compliment and a metric. I said, "I'll keep it in mind." She smiled and wrote something down. I went into the supply closet, put my forehead against the cool metal shelf, and stayed there for a slow count of 10 before I went back to work. She left a plate on my desk on a Thursday, and the whole floor of my childhood fell straight through me. I came back from a long code, bone-tired, and there it was in the little charge office, a real plate, not a paper one, a slice of homemade apple pie under plastic wrap, and a folded note in Brooke's round hand. "Truce. I've missed you more than you know." B.I. stood over it and could not breathe right. She didn't know. That's what I kept telling myself, and it was probably true. She had never stood on the porch. She had no idea that a plate of food left as a gift was the exact shape of the wound. To her, it was pie. To me, it was the last Thanksgiving, the storm door locked, the tail lights, the paper plate going cold on the boards while I stood inside Theglas and understood my whole standing in that family in one image. A plate is what you leave for someone you don't set a place for. You set a place at the table. You leave a plate on the porch. My sister had walked into my new life and without malice, without even knowing, reproduced the precise gesture that had ended my old one. I didn't eat the pie. I couldn't. But I didn't throw it out either. And I want you to notice that because I noticed it later and it told me something I wasn't ready to know. I peeled off the plastic wrap, scraped the pie into the trash, washed the plate in the break room's sink, dried it, and put it in my bag to take home. I kept the plate. I didn't know why. I just knew I wasn't done with it yet. The worst part of that month wasn't Brooke. It was Deb. Deb Callahan, who taught me to start a line on a blown vein, and who spent Christmas with me 2 years running because neither of us had anywhere else to be, sat down next to me in the break room, patted my knee, and said the thing, "You should give her a chance, hun. She's your sister. Family's family." I looked at Deb and felt something I hadn't felt in 6 years in this building. Alone. Because Deb wasn't wrong from where she sat. From where she sat, a warm woman named Brooke had appeared and clearly adored her prickly older sister, and the prickly older sister was holding a grudge nobody could see the reason for. I'd never told Deb about the porch. I'd never told anyone. My whole survival strategy had been Torriv here as a woman with no backstory, clean and competent and free. And the cost of that clean slate was that when my family's story showed up in a nice cardigan, I had no counter story on file. Brooke had a narrative and an audience. I had a plate in my bag I couldn't explain. Family's family is a sentence that sounds like love and works like a lock. It's the sentence that keeps the scapegoat in the yard. Snorts, and now it was coming out of the mouth of the one person here I'd let all the way in. I said, "It's complicated, Deb." She said, It always is until somebody's gone. And squeezed my knee and meant it with her whole good heart, and I understood that the machinery had reached even here. There was nowhere in my life the story couldn't follow. It had a director now. It had a budget. And it was hearing my friends as extras. Brooke brought Lily to the hospital on a teacher workday, and watching my niece for 1 hour taught me more than a year off remembering ever had. Lily was 7 and unnervingly good. She sat in the charge office where her mother put her, and she did not fidget and she did not ask for anything. When I offered her a juice from the fridge, she looked up at me and said, "Is that allowed? Am I allowed?" And something in my chest folded in half. I knew that question. I invented that question. I'd asked a version of it my whole childhood, out loud and silently at every doorway of that crooked house. Am I allowed to come? Am I allowed to want? Am I allowed to take up the space a person takes up? Lily was learning it already in a warm house from a loving mother, and that was the thing that undid me because it meant the machinery didn't need a villain. It just needed a script, passed down hand to hand, mother to daughter, each one sure she was doing right. I crouched to Lily's height and said, "You're allowed. Juice is always allowed. You don't have to ask me for a drink of water, not ever, not here." She studied my face like I might be tricking her. Then she took the juice with both hands and whispered, "Thank you," 3 times. Brooke came back and scooped her up and said, "She's so easy, aren't you, baby? You're mommy's easy one." And kissed her hair, and Lily beamed at being easy, and I had to turn and pretend to read a monitor. "Mommy's easy one." That's how it starts. Nobody gets left on a porch on day 1. First you get taught that easy is the price of love. Then, one holiday, thatist whether you'll pay it. Brooke floated the idea by me in the parking garage, casual, like weather. "I was thinking," she said, keys spinning on one finger, "we should do Thanksgiving together this year, all of us. Get Mom and Dad back out here. Wouldn't that be something, a real reunion?" Thanksgiving. Of every holiday on the calendar, she reached for the one with my body under it. She didn't know that. Or she half knew, the way you half know a bruise is there before you press it. "I'll think about it," I said, which is what I say when the answer is no, but the room isn't safe for a no yet. "It would mean so much to Mom," she said. And there was the lever, right on schedule. Everything rooted through what it would mean to Mom. Never what it cost me. Never a single sentence about what the last Thanksgiving had done, because in the family story, the last Thanksgiving didn't happen. And you can't set a date to heal a wound the family has agreed doesn't exist. I could feel the shape of a plan now, though I couldn't see all of it yet. The visit, the plate, the softening of my reviews, the Thanksgiving pitch, Deb's gentle push, my parents on standby in Ohio. Pieces were moving toward something, and the something had a gravity. And the gravity wanted me at a table performing a healing that had never occurred, so that everyone else could feel healed. I drove home and put the plate from my desk on my own kitchen counter, wash it and clean, and looked at it for a long time. I still didn't know what it was for, but I was starting to understand it wasn't decoration. It was evidence. Of what? I'd find out at the gala. The hospital's annual employee recognition gala was 3 weeks out, and Brooke, I learned, was on the planning committee. Of course she was. It was a nice event, genuinely. The one night a year the administration put on a spread and handed out awards and pretended the parking was adequate. Physicians came, board members came, the local paper sometimes came. And this year I heard through the grapevine that runs faster than any EMR, the Vance family would be attending as guests of the director. My parents, flying back out to a work event, my work event. I sat with that for a while. Brooke had found a stage with better lighting than a break room and a bigger audience than a unit, and she was arranging for our estranged family to appear on it in public, in front of the exact people who would soon decide whether I got to run my ICU. The timing wasn't subtle once you saw it. The manager panel met the week of the gala. Dr. Ackafer mentioned it in passing that the committee would finalize impressions around then, and impressions in this building now had a department, and the department had a badge, and the badge belonged to my sister, who was staging a family reunion I never agreed to, 40 FT from the people holding my career. I understood it then, cold and clear. This was not going to be a fight I could win by being right. Being right was never the currency. I could be the best nurse in that building, and it wouldn't matter if on gala night I refused to smile for the photograph. And I was starting to suspect that the photograph was the whole point, that the smile was the price, and that the price, this time, had my future stapled to it. She said it plainly in the end, which I almost respected. We were in her office, a nice office with a window, the kind of office I'd once assumed came to whoever earned it. She'd called me in about the culture rollout, and after 10 minutes of warmth, she leaned back and said, "You know the board really listens to me on culture fit for the manager role." She let it sit. "It would help you," she said, "if we looked united at the gala. Mom and Dad there, the four of us, a nice picture. People remember a nice picture." I know some of you are yelling walk away at your screen right now. Hold that thought. It costs more than you think. Comment where you draw the line. Because here's what she was actually offering, translated out of nice. Perform the reunion, drop the boundary, be the easy one on cue, and I'll tell the board you're a culture fit and you'll get the job you've earned. Refuse. Stay difficult. Keep your porch to yourself. And well, she couldn't promise how the impressions would land. She smiled the whole time. She probably didn't even experience it as a threat. In her story, she was helping her sister, offering a bridge, being the peacemaker she'd been cast as. That's what makes the golden child so effective as an enforcer. They don't know they're enforcing. They think they're hugging you. I looked at her window and her plants and her earned-looking office, and I said, "I'll let you know." And I walked back to my unit, where the monitors were honest and the stakes were only life and death, which felt, right then, like a relief. Somewhere in Ohio, my mother was probably already picking out an outfit for the photo. I tried the honest road first, because I always try the honest road first, and I want you to see me try it, so you know I didn't jump straight to the hard thing. I asked Dr. Akafer for coffee, and I laid out my case for the manager role, clean, no politics, just the work. My retention numbers, my mortality reviews, the 2 new grads I'd kept from quitting. He listened, and he nodded, and he said, "Nora, you're the strongest clinical candidate we have. Full stop." And then he did the thing decent people do when they're about to tell you the truth. He set down his cup. "But the committee weighs the culture assessment heavily this cycle. That's Brooke's department. I've flagged that you two are related. I can't make them unhear her." He wasn't apologizing for a wrong he'd done. He was warning me about a wall he couldn't move. And that's the detail I need you to hold, because it's the difference between a story where the narrator is naive and a story where the narrator is trapped. I saw the trap. I named the trap. I did the mature, procedural thing and went to the person with power and made the honest case. And it wasn't enough, not because I was foolish, but because the game had been rigged one badge above my head by someone who could color my whole record with a single word like warmth. The clean road had a gate on it now, and my sister held the key, and the key came with a photo attached. Akafer looked at me, kind, tired. "Is there history there with your sister?" And I almost told him. 7 years of nobody knowing, and I almost handed it to a good man over coffee. I said, "Some." He waited. I didn't fill it. Not yet. My mother called 2 nights before the gala, and she used the softest weapon in the arsenal, the one I have never fully learned to block. "Nora, honey," that voice, the one that reaches past 34 and grabs 9. "Your father and I are so excited to see you shine at your work thing. Brooke says it's a big deal." I said the event was fine, nothing to shine at. "Well, we'll be there," she said. "The whole family together, finally." And then lower the actual pitch. "Just smile for one night, sweetheart, for your father. He's not getting any younger, and this would mean the world to him. Can you do that for us? One nice night, one nice night. As if I were the one who'd made all the nights before it unnice. As if the porch had happened to the family, some weather that blew through, and not been done to me by them on purpose more than once. She wasn't asking me to smile. She was asking me to sign, to agree in front of everyone, in a photograph that would outlive all of us, that the story was true, that we were a close family, that nothing was broken, that the plate on the porch was a thing I'd dreamed. And in exchange, the family would love me for an evening, and my sister would tell the board I was warm, and I'd get to run my unit, and all it would cost was every true thing I knew about my own life. "I have to go, Mom," I said. "There's a lot to do before the gala." She said, "We love you so much, you know that." And I said, "I know," which wasn't quite a lie, and hung up and stood in my kitchen with the clean plate on the counter and finally understood what it was for. I didn't sleep that night either, but it was a different kind of not sleeping. I sat at my kitchen table with the plate in front of me, the pie plate washed clean, catching the light from the stove. They always found room for Brooke. For me, they found a plate on the porch. I said it out loud to my empty apartment, and the sentence didn't hurt the way it used to. It clarified, because I finally saw the offer for what it was, laid flat on the table next to the plate. They weren't offering me a seat at last. They were offering me the plate again, only this time dressed up, this time with my career as the garnish, this time in front of a nicer crowd. "Come back to the family," the offer said. "All you have to do is stand on the porch and smile like it's the dining room. Pretend the plate is a place setting. Perform the belonging and we'll let you feel it for an evening." And I understood at my own table at 30 for the thing it had taken me a whole life and 2,000 me to reach. A place you have to earn isn't a place. It's an audition. I'd fled Ohio thinking I'd quit the audition. But I hadn't. I just moved it. For 7 years, I'd kept my apartment spotless and my record perfect and my needs invisible. Still auditioning. Still proving I was easy enough to deserve the room. Still performing for a panel that wasn't even in the state. The Porch had followed me here because I'd carried it. And now my sister was offering me the lead role in the family production one more time. And the strangest, freest thought arrived quiet as a monitor at night. I could simply not show up to the audition. The gala was in the atrium. The good one. With the glass ceiling and the borrowed chandeliers and a string trio playing something that made small talk feel important. I wore the one nice dress I owned and my good shoes. And I walked in knowing exactly how the night was scripted, because I'd finally read the whole script. My parents were already there. My father had on the tie he wore to funerals and weddings. The only tie he owned. And when he saw me, his face opened up so genuinely that it hurt, because his love was real. It was just never enough to move him to my side of a room. My mother wore blue and a hostess's radiance, working the small crowd near the awards table, telling a board member's wife I would later learn all about her 2 daughters, both in medicine in a way. Isn't it wonderful? Brooke was luminous. She'd built the evening and it fit her like the dress did. She found me within 90 seconds, took my elbow, steered me toward the knot of people who mattered, Dr. Ackheffer and 2 board members and the CEO with the good handshake. "Everyone, this is my sister Nora, our ICU charge nurse, honestly the backbone of that unit. Warm, generous, perfectly pitched. And I watched the trap close with something almost like admiration because it was elegant. In one sentence, she'd been gracious about me in front of the exact people, which meant when the photo came, refusing it would look like spite against a sister who just praised me. The board members beamed. My mother drifted over, radiant, and slid into the group. And a photographer with a lanyard hovered at the edge like he'd been told where to stand because he had. Lily was there, too, in a small velvet dress holding my father's hand, watching the grown-ups with those careful eyes. The lights were warm. The music swelled. The stage was set exactly as I'd known it would be, and every person in that circle was waiting, without knowing it, to see whether I'd take my mark. Then a server passed with a tray of desserts, and Brooke, quick and bright, took a small plate off it, a slice off something, and held it out to me in front of everyone. "Here," she said, laughing a little warm for the crowd. "You never eat. Welcome back to the family, sis." A plate held out to me in front of the board, in front of my parents, in front of the photographer already lifting his camera, in front of Lily. The whole room tilted toward the picture. The reunited sisters, the offered plate, the smile that would run in the hospital newsletter and end forever in every version of the story, the question of what happened to Nora. Take the plate. Smile. Get the job, be easy. Be loved for one night. Pay the price you've always paid. My mother's face was luminous with anticipation. My father was already misting up. Brooke's arm was steady. the plate between us like a small, warm planet. And I felt the entire gravity of my life pulling my hand up to receive it. And I looked down at Lily instead. 7 years old, holding her grandfather's hand, watching her aunt with the careful eyes of a child learning the exchange rate of love in real time, watching to see what a woman does when the family holds out a plate and calls it a seat. I did not raise my voice. I did not knock the plate away. I have held steady over a coding patient with a family screaming in the doorway. I could hold steady here. I looked at my sister and I looked at the plate, and very gently I did not take it. I let my hands stay at my sides. "No, thank you," I said, quiet enough that only the circle heard, and the photographer's camera came down, confused, and my mother's radiance flickered. And the warm little planet of the plate hung in the air between us with nowhere to land. And the old house, 2,000 miles and 25 years away, finally, quietly, came down. Brooke's smile stayed up a beat too long, the way a smile does when the person behind it is recalculating. "Nora," she said, softer, stepping in so the circle couldn't hear. "Don't do this here, please, just take the plate." My mother closed in on my other side, still smiling for the room, her voice a hiss under the string trio. "Nora Ellison, do not embarrass this family. Not here, not in front of these people." And there it was, the whole thing undressed at last. The fear wasn't losing me. It was the picture, it was the people. It was the story staying smooth. I kept my voice level. I aimed it only at the two of them. "I know what you're offering," I said to Brooke. The photo and then a good word to the board. "I'm going to trade a life for a job. And because that's what the job is stable to now, I'm withdrawing from the manager search. Tomorrow I'll tell the panel myself." Brooke's face went white. "You're throwing it away," she whispered. "You'd throw away the thing you want to spite us." And that was the moment I could have gotten angry, and I didn't. Because I finally understood I wasn't spitting anyone. I was leaving an audition I'd been standing in since I was 9. "I'm not spitting you," I said. "I'm just not paying for it anymore." My mother's mask cracked, and for 1 second, one true second, I saw all the way down. A frightened woman who had spent her whole life earning her own seat by keeping everyone else's story smooth, who had left a plate on a porch because that was the arithmetic she'd been taught. Subtract the difficult one so the picture stays warm. I almost felt it. The pull to comfort her, to smooth it, to reach for the bread. Instead, I said the thing I'd carried across the country. "You told me family doesn't keep score, Mom." I looked at her, not unkindly. "You're right. I'm done keeping score. I'm keeping distance." And then to all of it, to the plate and the porch and the 25 years, quiet enough that only we three heard it. A place you have to earn isn't a place. It's an audition. And I'm done auditioning. I set my untouched water glass on the table and I walked out of the circle, past the photographer, past my weeping father, into the cold, clean air of the parking lot, and I did not look back to see the picture I'd refused to be in. I sat in my car in the parking garage for a long time, and I waited for the panic to come. The old dread of having been difficult, of having ruined the picture, of the punishment that always followed a no. It didn't come. What came instead was quiet. I just walked away from the job I wanted in front of the people who could give it to me, and I felt, for the first time I could remember, like I was not being graded. That's when I understood what I'd actually done, and it wasn't about Brooke or the board or even the plate. For 7 years, I'd thought leaving Ohio had freed me, but I'd taken the audition with me. I'd kept auditioning for an empty panel, keeping my life flawless, my needs invisible, my edges filed down, still trying to prove I was easy enough to deserve the room. Walking out of that circle wasn't the first brave thing I'd done. It was the first time I'd stopped performing the belonging I'd never been given and simply belonged to myself instead. The porch didn't lose its power tonight because I finally won the family's approval. It lost its power because I stopped needing it to. My hands were steady on the wheel. Somewhere above me, the gala was still going, the string trio still playing. My mother, no doubt, already reframing the moment into a story where I was cold, and she was blameless because that story was the only house she knew how to live in. Let her. I wasn't a room in it anymore. I started the car. The clean plate was still on my kitchen counter at home, and I knew, driving through the empty streets, exactly what I was going to do with it. I withdrew from the manager search the next morning in writing before I could talk myself out of it. The job went to a decent nurse from the cardiac floor who will do it fine, and who did not have to sell anything to get it. I stayed charge nurse in my ICU, which I love, on the unit I built with the monitors that talked to me. Dr. Okafor stopped me in the hall the week after and didn't ask what happened at the gala. He just said, "Whatever that was, you did the right thing." It showed. A month later, he asked me to design and lead the new nurse residency for the whole hospital. A real program, my curriculum, my name on it, built around exactly the honest, unsoftened teaching my sister had tried to file down. It wasn't a consolation prize, and it wasn't a gift. It was the clean consequence of being someone who could be trusted, offered by a man who didn't need me to perform anything to earn it. My parents flew back to Ohio. My mother and I are not repaired. She still believes I humiliated her, and she tells the version of the story where the porch never happened because that story is the only room she can afford to live in, and I've stopped trying to renovate it. That force didn't die because I stood up to it. It just lost its grip on me. But here's the thing I didn't see coming. 3 weeks after the gala, a large envelope arrived from Ohio, addressed in a careful child's hand. Inside was a drawing from Lily. 2 stick figures at a table, a big one and a small one, and in front of each of them, drawn in careful brown crayon, a plate. The same size, both at the table, no porch. On the back, in Brooke's handwriting, a single line. She drew this unprompted. And then, underneath, in smaller writing, like it cost her something, "I've been thinking about the plates. I don't know if my sister will ever climb all the way out of the warm house she was raised to guard. Golden children rarely do." The house is comfortable, and leaving it means admitting the porch was real. But she'd noticed. She'd noticed the plates. And her daughter, 7 years old, had already drawn a table where both places were set, unprompted, because one afternoon a blunt aunt told her that she was allowed, that she didn't have to ask for water, that she didn't have to be easy to be loved. That's where the chain breaks, not in the ones who were taught the arithmetic, in the ones who never learn it in the first place. I put Lily's drawing on my refrigerator, next to the clean plate I finally understood, and I stopped waiting for the family I was born into to set me a place. I used to think love was a table you had to earn your way back to. It isn't. It's a plate someone sets for you before you even ask. A cold plate on a porch, a warm one on a desk. 7 years to learn the difference between the two. If you've ever set a boundary and been told it was cruelty just because the family had always called it that, then you already know how heavy that plate can be, and how light your hands feel the moment you finally stop holding it. This channel is for you. Subscribe, and I'll see you at the next story.